Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on heat stress. Today, we have two guest speakers with us, Jim Ryan from Epicore and Josh Martin with Solid Hydration. They're going to be discussing the different methods to handle and mitigate heat stress on the job. If you have any questions, please just put that down in the chat and we'll discuss at the end of the webinar. And with that said, let's go ahead and kind of get things rolling here. All right, so just a little bit about Arbill. Arbill has been in business for over 80 years, and of course, safety being our only focus. We're a national safety provider for industrial and government entities. Over 50 years of manufacturing experience. We have our own brand called TrueLine. We also independently test all of our PPE to ensure that it meets or exceeds the guidelines. And of course, in 2015, Arbill introduced what we call Safety Care as a comprehensive package for everything, under one umbrella as it relates to safety. We're also a certified woman-owned business. And again, you can kind of see all the accolades down at the bottom there. So just to introduce myself, my name is Chuck Franklin. I'm Director of EH&S Managed Services here at Arbill. I've got 28 years in the safety world, most of my background in poultry, but also in other industries as well. I hold a bachelor's degree from Troy University and also have a CFR General Industry certification from the University of Alabama. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Jim and let Jim go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. So I'm Jim Ryan. I'm the CRO at Epicore Biosystems, and get into our history as a company and safety. My personal background is been doing technology startups since the early 90s. Around the world, spent a lot of time in Japan, Asia Pacific, and then obviously back here in the US for the last 15 years or so. Digital health, biotech have kind of been my sweet spot. And Epicore really combines digital health with industrial safety. So we can go to the next slide.
All right. So with that said, our agenda today basically is recognize the signs and symptoms of heat stress to prevent occupational illness and injuries, talk about Epicore Biosystems, and of course, Solid Hydration will also do their presentation as well. But before that, we're going to jump in just a few intro slides about occupational heat stress. And of course, everyone knows this occurs basically as a result of combination of metabolic heat, atmospheric conditions, and causing an increase in the heat storage of the worker's body. Unabated heat stress can result in the reduced productivity, injuries, disease, and eventually death. And of course, additional hazards presented by heat stress as workers experience sweaty palms, fogged up glasses, and heat limiting effects on cognitive reasoning. Also, some of the risk factors involved are hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, respiratory illness, medication, and of course, general physical fitness. And with that, Jim, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So let's jump into our first slide. So the question is, everybody has a heat stress plan, and what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on primarily preventing those acute injuries, or are you focusing on keeping people hydrated and having enough electrolytes throughout the day? And obviously, it's kind of a leading question. It should be the former. We obviously we don't want acute injuries. But focusing only on the acute injury prevention leaves the most important problem unsolved. And if you agree with that, then the question becomes, how do you know how often everyone needs to rehydrate? How do you know how often everyone needs electrolytes? So we know that obviously every summer it gets hotter. And that environmental heat load is really affecting workers more and more, especially if they work outdoors or even indoors in spaces that aren't air conditioned. And as I said, it's not just an acute safety issue, it's also a productivity issue. We've also found through our studies and trials throughout the world that many workers, up to 70%, are starting the shift dehydrated. And so it's even more important to provide them that protection early on before they start to show signs of acute injury. And then who's most at risk? So we have all these different categories. Industrial athletes is kind of a category we came up with. It's sort of the most physically active of the industrial workers out there. And we see these types of workers in many industries, certainly in oil and gas, utilities, where they're moving around a lot. They're doing a lot of work that requires heavy lifting, often outdoors. And they're sweating. We also have a sports and fitness side of our business where we work with professional sports teams. We work with the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, and we see in our data that the heaviest sweaters among our subjects are actually in the industrial sector. Sort of the extreme outliers, the top 10%. Of our industrial athletes are losing more sweat than NFL linebackers. And in addition, there's other risks. Indoor locations that either have radiant heat sources or are just not air conditioned, and so get very hot when the outdoor temperature goes up. You have the physically demanding occupations. And obviously outdoors when it gets hot. PPE is a huge factor. So PPE can raise the temperature at the surface of the skin to over 102, 103 degrees we see. And then a really big class of high risk workers are the ones who are not acclimatized. So they've either they're being shifted to a new location. They're maybe a new hire. You're doing something like a turnaround in the oil and gas industry or the petrochemical industry. Anytime somebody's just suddenly exposed to heat where they hadn't been exposed to that kind of heat previously. Go to the next one. The other thing to keep in mind is it's really easy to quantify the cost of acute heat injuries that are recordable and that are recorded as heat injuries. So, anytime someone has heat stress, they're obviously showing symptoms of that. Certainly anyone on hospitalizations and clearly deaths that result from this, we see those clearly in the statistics, but the real cost is much greater than that. And that's usually because, a lot of these injuries are not recorded as heat-related injuries. Because earlier on, as you're becoming dehydrated, you start to lose your cognitive abilities, your hand-eye coordination. It's much easier to have other types of accidents that result that aren't recorded necessarily as heat. And then there's just the low-level fatigue, cramping, headaches, people having to take extra days off of work or not being as productive as they could be. And that's illustrated really clearly in what we call the heat accident chain. So, heat accidents start with mild dehydration usually. And you can see they progress. And, up until that second to last chain, that elevated core body temp and heart rate, it's really hard to detect them. It's hard to detect that a person is on their way to an acute heat injury. And as I mentioned, in some cases, before they get to that acute heat injury, they might have another kind of injury. So that third to last link in the chain, what we see and what OSHA sees is that there's 40 to 50x more heat-related accidents than are actually recorded as heat-related. And that's because of this increased risk of other types of injuries that are caused by the cognitive impairment, which is caused by dehydration. And so I think a lot of the heat safety technology that's been available up until this point has really focused sort of at that last link in the chain, monitoring body temperature, monitoring skin temperature, monitoring heart rate and heart rate variability. But really, by the time those indicators are showing danger, you're really too late. That person is going to have to, at the very least, come out of the field. Hopefully, putting them in an air-conditioned truck or an air-conditioned room and giving them fluids and electrolytes is enough. Often that won't be, and they'll need medical care. As I said, sometimes if you don't catch it early enough, as we all know, it can lead even to death. And so what we decided to do at Epicore is create a technology that can intervene at the very beginning of the heat accident chain. So rather than measuring things like heart rate and temperature, although we do measure temperature on our device, the primary measurement that we give you is how much fluid has each individual employee lost. So the device fits on the arm, sweat flows through it. So, if somebody's a heavy sweater, then it's recording their actual sweat rate. If somebody's a light sweater, it's recording their actual sweat rate. So you could have 100 people wearing these devices, and maybe the top 10% of them are losing, 2 liters of sweat in an hour, and the low 10% might only lose 250 milliliters in an hour. But the advantage is it's personalized. So we're recording sweat loss directly, intervening really early. So, obviously you're not getting those acute incidents, but you're also keeping people healthy. You're avoiding that cognitive impairment, the fatigue, the reduced productivity, the headaches. They feel better. They go home from work and they have energy to spend time with their family. They're not feeling, sort of dead tired at the end of every day. And another thing we've found in our studies, and I can send you, anyone who's interested, we have a list of all our scientific studies. We found that that if you have this sort of mild dehydration continuously every day for weeks and years on end, eventually you end up with kidney injuries, which obviously nobody wants to see. So all those things combined, we decided to intervene early. And just a little bit about our history. I'll be really quick here. We started out with Gatorade and PepsiCo investing in our company. We created a product for the sports and fitness industry. You might have seen Jason Tatum wears our patch, although unfortunately not for the rest of the year this year. Serena Williams, Messi, they all wear our patch. And this product was released 8 or 9 years ago. And then Chevron came to us and they said, hey, we love what you're doing with sports. Can you do that for our industrial athletes, but in an electronic form factor that'll give us data in real time? And so that's why we originally developed this product. Chevron invested in our company as well. They've deployed our product around the world. We've got thousands of these out there. And as I said, we're really focused on scientific validation. And we've got a list of 60 publications that we can send if you're interested. But yeah, that's a little bit on the background. And, as I mentioned, the fact that we're measuring sweat loss and we're not measuring proxy measures means that our approach is also highly individualized. So, not only do we intervene a lot earlier, but we can also tell you who's sweating the most, who's sweating the least, who's losing the most electrolytes, who's losing the least electrolytes, and that can feed into every individual will know, oh yeah, I just sweated out 1,500 milligrams of sodium. I really need to replenish my electrolytes and my fluids. And so you can see this huge variability. In our research, we found a 22x difference in sweat loss and a 15x difference in sodium loss among our lowest and highest data points. We talked about this at the beginning, but yeah, the importance of an individualized approach where we're measuring each individual person instead of relying on proxy measures and population averages is that there's a lot of factors that are individual, that are going to factor into whether, how much people sweat, how much electrolytes they lose, and a lot of that you just won't know. I mean, even the person themselves might not know. And as I mentioned, there's all these different factors: acclimatization, how they started the day, fitness level, but some of it's even genetic, and people just don't know it until they measure it. So connected hydration is our intrinsically safe wearable, and works really simply. You can see it here in the photo on the bicep. It's an electronic device, but it is Class 1 Div 2 intrinsically safe. It doesn't require recharging. The battery is a sealed battery. It lasts 1,200 hours, and we replace it when it gets low. But the important thing is that it's super easy for the worker to follow the advice of the device. And what the device does is when it detects you've lost 500 milliliters of water, it vibrates. You feel the vibration on your arm, you drink 500 milliliters of water, and then you're back to being hydrated again. It's that simple. You do that throughout the day. You never even get to that second, third link in the chain. The device comes with a mobile app, which is, the workers, they don't need to carry a phone around, all day. The device, as I said, it vibrates as its primary feedback. But, if the worker is interested in seeing more detail, maybe on their lunch break or at the end of the day, they can open up the mobile app and they can see a graph of how they stayed hydrated throughout the day. They can see really specific numbers on their losses, and we also provide individualized recommendations for electrolyte replacement. And you'll hear a little bit about electrolytes right after this. As I said, we measure sweat loss directly. The only device that does that in the industrial safety space. And that allows us to catch those outliers and to give an individualized alert and warning to each person based on their actual sweat loss. We're also measuring sodium loss in real time. We measure skin temperature and ambient temperature. So if you're wearing PPE, the ambient temp would be the under PPE temp. Otherwise, it's just the air temp. And then also activity level accelerometer. And this data is all collected, transmitted to the cloud every 20 seconds. So the safety teams and management can see how things are going. They can collect this data over time. They can start to analyze it and detect trends, detect what factors lead to higher levels of hydration incidents and heat incidents by combining this data with all sorts of other data that you have that you're collecting. And most importantly, we are an industrial grade device. It's our only market for this, the connected hydration device. We only sell it as industrial safety. We don't sell it to any other sectors. Chevron paid for us to develop it, and they were our first test site. We tested it with them in the field for 2 years before we released it. And Chevron told us what they needed. They needed intrinsically safe. They didn't want to recharge a device every day, so we went with a sealed battery. They didn't, a lot of their sites don't have internet, so they wanted onboard memory. They needed data privacy protection. They needed it to work in really hot locations. And so we did all that for Chevron, and that means pretty much, I think it would be hard to find sites that are more demanding than this. As I mentioned, the smartphone gives you additional details not required. The device just provides you those haptic feedback throughout the day. And that's again what Chevron told us. The workers can't carry a phone around all day, so whatever we developed had to work without a phone. So that's how we did it.
All right.
That's everything. Thank you.
Well, go ahead and just introduce yourself, and then we'll kick everything off with your presentation.
Awesome, for sure. That was some amazing information. I mean, you can't get more safe than everything Jim explained, right? And hand in hand, obviously, with hydration comes electrolyte replenishment, right? And so that's what we did with solid hydration was completely innovated the electrolyte replenishment space to be able to 3 to 10 times increase the absorption of electrolytes in order to maintain that fluid balance, in order to lead to the hydration needed that avoids everything that Jim explained, and allows for a better, more innovative, healthier, and safer work environment. So that's what we've done, and we can kind of explain how, because it's been many decades in waiting now. Awesome. So it's the electrolyte replenishment industry has been interesting. So you see a couple of those awards at top. So just here in 2025, Solid Hydration was awarded both the top heat stress protection product and innovation, as well as the top total worker health product and innovation, because we took an industry that really hadn't been touched for decades. Actually, we're going on about 6 decades now. I think Gatorade was invented back in 1965 or so by the University of Florida. And what's interesting is, since that opportunity, nothing has changed. There's been zero hydration innovation. Every product that has come, starting with Gatorade all the way through to any powders, mixes, pills, you name it, are all gut absorbed electrolyte products. Now that's interesting, because every doctor, every scientist, every study, medical link we have for you and everyone that you can view on your own, shows that that is actually the body's least effective way to ever absorb electrolytes. So there's been no change in that, and so that's why the industry was ready for innovation and change in order to be able to completely flip that electrolyte absorption process on its head. Another interesting thing, we heard a lot about Gatorade earlier, and studies. So many studies in general are done when it comes to heat stress and hydration, but technically there's never been an absorption study. So there's not one current electrolyte product out there that has said, this is how much actually absorbs, this is how much is bioavailable. We understand what's on the label. This is how much actually ends up in the bloodstream. So that's been a topic that's been bypassed quite a bit, because it's not very favorable. Nothing wrong with any of the products that are out there. It's not their fault, right? That is just how the body works. The body filters through the liver, and there's something called the first pass metabolism, and that filters out the majority of the electrolytes that end up going down through the gut. And this is why we have what you see here. So it's funny to think about a gold standard. So when we think about electrolyte replenishment, what is the gold standard? So if you have any ideas in the industry, what would be the absolute gold standard for electrolyte replenishment? Huge hint right there on the screen, right? If you have a worker or an employee suffering from heat stress or dehydration, a few links down in the chain, like Jim explained, and they go to the hospital, what does the hospital give them? Right? They don't give them a Gatorade to drink, not picking on any specific product. They don't give them Squincher. They don't give them Drip Drop or Liquid IV. That's right. They give them an actual IV, right? Because an IV does 3 things. There are 3 reasons that an IV is the absolute gold standard. That if you went to the hospital and said, no, just go ahead and mix up a powder electrolyte and I'll drink it, they would laugh you out of the room. Because an IV does 3 things. It bypasses the gut completely. So what's in that IV bag, that dextrose, sodium, potassium, those electrolytes, those fluid, completely bypass the gut. They never go into the gut. So they're never metabolized by the gut nor the liver like every other electrolyte product. Number 2, it enters the bloodstream directly. There's that awful pokey thing that I can't stand called a needle, and that's how it gets directly into the bloodstream. And number 3 is it absorbs instantly. There is no wait time. Once that's hooked up and they turn that on, you see that drip, good to go. That starts entering the bloodstream directly. So there's 3 things that make an IV the absolute gold standard in the industry. All 3 of those things is what Solid Hydration achieved by creating a new hydration innovation. All 3 of those things, bypassing the gut, absorbing directly into the bloodstream, and absorbing instantly, all happen through a process called intraoral absorption. Intraoral absorption is awesome. And it is the most studied and proven method of nutrient absorption into the bloodstream. So while Solid Hydration is able to take advantage of intraoral absorption and absorb directly to the bloodstream, instantly and bypassing the gut, all three factors that meet the gold standard. At the same time, there's not one electrolyte replenishment product on the market that meets even one of those standards. There's not one product that bypasses the gut. They're all gut absorbed, enters the bloodstream directly. They all have to go down through the GI tract, the first hepatic pass, and enter instantly, absorb instantly, about a 20-30 minute process. So that's what intraoral absorption does. So for an example, there's so many examples of intraoral absorption. One common one that we see today, we see amongst some of our workers and things like that is, I guess you could say, chewing tobacco or maybe even a nicotine pouch. So I've never tried it, never done it, but the science behind it, if you think to yourself, why does someone put that in their cheek, right? They don't take that nicotine pouch and mix it up in a bottle of water and drink it. They don't take that and chew it up and swallow it, right? It actually never enters into the digestive tract at all. So the reason why that is placed in the lining of the mouth is intraoral absorption. That's absorption that takes place immediately. It can happen through the sublingual capillaries, sure. It can happen through the oral mucosa, the buccal tissue. The whole lining of the mouth is made to absorb nutrients directly into the bloodstream. So through the intraoral absorption process, you're able to completely bypass the gut. Once you bypass the gut, you've actually met technically the standard of the top electrolyte replenishment system, which is an IV. Once you bypass the gut, everything that goes into the gut is exposed through metabolism, the gut and liver. That'll filter out up to, sometimes even more, 90% of the electrolytes that are put through that system, with the remaining 10 or so percent taking up to or greater than 20 minutes to absorb into the bloodstream. So there's some cool studies down there below, and there's dozens more that generally and specifically talk to the effectiveness of intraoral absorption. So that's what solid hydration has been able to do, essentially creating what now the market calls the needleless IV. So instead of taking that needle, poking the arm, and receiving those electrolytes directly, instantly, and bypassing the gut, you're able to do so much more easily, much more economically, and much more enjoyably directly through the lining of the mouth. So let's take a look at what that looks like. On that next slide there, you can see how that actually measures up. So in yellow, you can see just very, very simple graph that we've taken from all studies and just kind of made it look very, very easy. The yellow there is exactly what happens, what every doctor knows, what every scientist knows when we drink electrolytes. About 20 minutes in, we get some absorption. That's about it. The majority of that, up to 90%, never makes it into the bloodstream. It follows the first hepatic pass, filtered out in the liver. Unfortunately, it's urinated out, and there it is. So really, drinking those electrolytes, or an electrolyte pill, any electrolyte that goes down to the gut, has fallen into the category of basically better than nothing. It is absolutely better than nothing. If it came to not drinking anything, it's not advised. If it came to only drinking water, I mean, it's not advised. Why not have some electrolytes? Because it's better than nothing. But once you bypass the gut completely, and once you absorb directly through the lining of the mouth straight into the bloodstream, just like a needleless IV, now you have 10x'd the absorption of electrolytes above the baseline. And not just 10 times more total absorption, or what doctors call 10 times more total bioavailability, but also instantly. You can see even within the 5-minute mark that you can follow that up to the top, and you've already absorbed more electrolytes within 5 minutes than you would in a whole 20 minutes or an hour or any amount of time taking electrolytes through the gut. So that's a pretty amazing comparison that holds true to every single study that has ever been done when it comes to absorption. But what would be increased absorption, right? So great, we can get 10 times more absorption. We can get that through a needle as well, but a needle is not convenient, right? A needle isn't something that someone can do anytime, any day, hands-free, while they're doing any other type of activity, right? So if it's not convenient, there's something called patient compliance, right? If doctors prescribe a process to a patient and it's not convenient, it doesn't matter how much that process will help, the patient most likely won't do it, and then it's all for nothing. So to be the absolute most effective, need to actually combine that with being the most convenient. So that's what intraoral absorption does as well. So instead of waiting for those electrolytes to process through the gut and GI tract and be metabolized, instead of chewing and swallowing and mixing and making mess and drinking and having all the gut issues that go along with that, it's a process that's now made much easier, right? Much more simple, instant, and completely hands-free, simply by absorbing through the lining of the mouth. By changing the mechanism of absorption for electrolytes, absolutely everything changes. The effectiveness, the absorption of mouth, the time to absorption, the ease of use, every single checkbox that goes along with safety and innovation when it comes to electrolyte replenishment has been checked. So there's obviously a handful, we've learned about some of them, of precautions to take when it comes to heat stress and total worker health, right? Absorbing electrolytes into the bloodstream is one of them. And so we made it possible to be able to do that much easier and at a up to 10 times greater rate than anything that exists, simply by innovating the method of delivery. Josh just had a really good question. Do you still need some type of fluid? Absolutely, 100%. Always drink water. Just like the Epicore patch tells us, drink this much water. Always drink water. Now, hydration is a factor of two things: water and electrolytes. Once those electrolytes get into the cells, the sodium and potassium make them into the cells. Hydration happens at a cellular level. Now the water is able to be retained in the cells, and the cell is hydrated. Now the body and the person is hydrated. Now, once someone takes electrolytes and mixes those electrolytes into the water, now that is the most ineffective way to get the electrolytes. So drinking water is the best way to get water. Drinking electrolytes in water is the most ineffective way to get electrolytes. So once you pull those electrolytes out of water, you absorb those electrolytes directly, whether that be through a needle, which is fun, right? Or simply directly through the lining of the mouth through intraoral absorption. Now you absorb up to 10 times more electrolytes, and that water that is taken into the body is that much more efficient. The cells are now able to hold that much more of the water that is consumed in order to maintain that hydration that Epicore measures. Really good question. If there's any other thoughts, feel free. Otherwise, we can move on from there.
All right. Josh, looks like somebody would be interested in reviewing the studies. So there's
Absolutely. Yep. We can provide those. Got links. There's some right there on the slides, but you obviously don't have access to those right there. But from our website and the science page, reviewing studies for intraoral absorption, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Just go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll review them real quick. Give everybody a few minutes to type anything up. All right, is the chart of absorption for a single tablet or multiple tablets?
Good question. That's for any amount. So anytime that the absorption studies are done, it's done for the exact same amount. So for example, the study you saw there, I think that was done with a Division I university, and they're a Coca-Cola school. So that makes them a Powerade school. So they took equal amounts of Powerade powder. My memory won't even serve me. I think it was 9 grams, and mixed it in fluid. Obviously took blood at 0 minutes all the way through, and then took that exact same amount of powder. We converted it with our tech into an intraorally absorbable form, and that's what the subjects or the patients or the athletes used instead. And so it doesn't. So that absorption amount is regardless of the amount of the electrolytes. It could be 1 gram or 50 grams, and the absorption amount will still be 3 to 10 times greater. Now, there may have been another question within that question, which is, how much do you take and what is a serving? And there, yes, it's only 1 round, what we call round. We stay away from calling them tablets because a tablet is typically associated with something that you chew, swallow, or drop in a bottle of water. And for the first time ever, you don't do any one of those 3 things. You just allow it to absorb right there in the lining of the mouth. So serving is absolutely one round is what replaces 1 serving of whatever other product would be, a bottle of Gatorade, a stick pack of Squincher, a stick pack of Liquid IV, salt pills, whatever's out there, 1 for 1.
All right. The next question is there a guideline on how often or how many to take and how often?
Yeah, Good question. Jim covered that quite a bit. If you think back to Jim's slide of all of the internal and external factors that lead to dehydration, right? So many. He even went as far, which is brilliant, genetic factors, which is absolutely true, right? So now think about that. There's so many internal, external factors. Two individuals working at the same company doing different jobs could be on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So if that electrolyte product has the exact same dosing recommendations for everybody who picks up that package, well, they probably miss 99% of the people completely over their head, either way too much, way too little, whatever it is. So there are so many factors that lead to knowing. So the best way to know how to dose, very simple. So 1 for 1. Whatever the current serving is now, we replace that. So for example, most recent, we just spoke to this morning, oil rig company out on the Gulf, close to where I'm at. I'm in Florida. It's very hot on the Gulf on their deck, maybe 140 degrees. And so what their protocol is bottle of water and a stick pack of another product, electrolyte product, every hour. So what they did is they just replaced that bottle of water and 1 round or 1 tablet of solid hydration every hour. And so you replace the servings 1 for 1. Now the actual recommended dosing, if an electrolyte product ever has a recommended dose, run as far away as you can, because again, they're going to miss 99% of the actual dose needed for everyone. But the easy answer to that is, for all the distributors, the large companies, everyone who has switched over, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio, replacing electrolyte serving with 1 serving of solid hydration.
All right. Looks like got another question: is how long does it take to absorb, but how long does it last?
Good question. Since it's not metabolized in the liver and it doesn't exit, right? It lasts much longer. But again, now you're getting into the 30 or so factors that are so highly individualized, internal and external, right? So when using another electrolyte product, if that product needed to be replenished within 30 minutes, it would be the same with this product, right? If someone is able to take an electrolyte product and not need one for the rest of the day, fantastic. Same with this product. So that question is a great question, but that question is not product specific. It's very personal to that individual, internal factors, external factors, heat factors, ambient factors, genetic factors, everything you can think of. So a good question, but that's more for individualized for the person rather than for the product.
All right, then the next question: any need to take the round sublingual? Any change in absorbing rate?
Nope, not at all. Well, good question. There's no harm in doing that, but if I hear the words to the question specifically, yes, there is a slight change in absorption rate through the buccal tissue. Buccal tissue actually absorbs, it's a much larger lining, and it's even more vascularized than the sublingual capillaries. So buccal tissue is actually slightly greater absorption. That's why you see certain products, such as like tobacco, nicotine, things like that, being absorbed through the cheek. The sublingual is highly popularized with very small intraoral or sublingual absorbed pills or liquids like tinctures, because it creates a natural cavity which holds liquids much better than in the cheek, or a very small type of pill, a very small 10 milligram, 20 milligram pill won't get lost down there, right? But technically absorption is slightly greater, but it's about the same, but technically slightly greater in the cheek. But either one works. Again, the whole oral mucosa, the whole lining of the mouth, even the inside of the lips, are all made to absorb nutrients directly to the bloodstream through the jugular vein.
All right, and Jim had threw a checklist, a clickable list in there. Jim, do you want to say anything about that before I move on to the other questions?
No, just if you're interested in taking a look at that, it'll take you straight to a synopsis of every paper, and then you can actually click and read the entire paper for anyone and they're all published in peer-reviewed journals.
Okay, all right. Then Kevin asked, your gut can bioregulate electrolyte absorption. If you bypass this, can you overconsume electrolytes? Normally an IV is done in controlled setting and more commonly in emergency situations. What are the risks of bypassing the gut's bioregulation?
Good question. So when it comes to overconsumption, if you look back at the charts, again, no current electrolyte company has ever done an absorption study, because what that study will actually teach is how much is eliminated by the body, right? So if you're absorbing to 10% or 0%, if it's a sugar-free electrolyte, because electrolytes must have a driver into the cells, which is just like in an IV, that'll be dextrose. Then your body's very, very efficient at getting rid of the rest of it. So the body's already used to getting rid of anywhere from 90 to even 100% up to of electrolytes in the system. So good question. If someone was to say, hey, these are so amazing, these are so delicious, I'm going to just go ahead and consume all of these right now, great. It might be a waste of money, but the body is extremely, like we've already learned, efficient at getting rid of those excess minerals, and that's simply what it'll do. So unlike something that would have a prescription drug or a stimulant like caffeine that will have adverse overdose effects, luckily electrolytes won't.
And if I can just add to that, in the context of high environmental heat, high physical stress, and elevated sweat rates, the far bigger danger is hyponatremia. So people drinking water and not replenishing electrolytes can lead to hyponatremia quite quickly. There's it's very well documented the severe effects on the kidneys and even leading to death that can result.
Yeah, unfortunately, to add on to that, we had a mother here in Florida running a marathon, and unfortunately, she passed away due to that overconsumption of fluids without the electrolytes. So it was a sad learning experience for a lot involved.
And really, I think Nav took care of that one question. And then the last thing, and I think Rebecca was just saying that sugars can be metabolized in the muscle and the brain in a matter of minutes, if that helps. And I'm thinking she's referring to something above, talking about the gut regulation and all. All right. Any other questions? I think we're down to the end of our time there. Just a little plug here about Arbill is, we are workplace safety plays an important part in the organization. For over 80 years, we've helped industrial clients. If you've got any help, need any help or whatever, schedule time with us, and we're glad to help you out. Of course, if you've got any suggestions on any upcoming webinars, there's my email, cfranklin@arbill.com. And of course, if you got any feedback, please use the QR code there, QR code to give us that feedback. And I'll leave that up for a few minutes. And then the last slide is, of course, just a thank you to everyone. And we appreciate your time today. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Josh, for y'all's time today and for giving us a good overview of everything. Again, if you've got any questions, you can always email me, and I can always send that out, and we can get back with you. Anything else, Josh, Jim, you guys want to cover?
No,
nope. Thanks for having us, and happy to field any questions after the fact if needed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
As well. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone, and thank you for taking the time, and we appreciate it. And this concludes our event. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.